Critical Reflections on Autism Advocacy for and Against Autism Subtypes by Richard Woods, a London and South Bank University PhD student. I do have a few conflicts of interest. I am developing various PDA tools. I do earn some income from delivering training sessions on PDA, and I reluctantly advocate for PDA to be diagnosed as a standalone category. So, a bit about my background. I am diagnosed as autistic in 2012. I meet Elizabeth Needs' PDA profile, but I'm not emotionally attached to it. I'm no longer basing my identity on diagnostic categories as much as I can do, and I'm equally respecting divergent views and evidence on PDA to synthesise appropriate outlooks on it. My PhD is investigating PDA as part of the Critical Autism Studies/Disability Studies group at London South Bank University. This is my interpretation of PDA in its literature. Um, so, yeah. I may use medical model-based language, but this is reflecting source material. I intrinsically recognise that such categories are social constructs. So, yeah. Just a quick overview of the introduction. So, critiquing. While I'm critiquing constructs of profound autism and PDA Profile of Autism, I'm critiquing the categories themselves, not the actual difficulties that people are experiencing. I think we do need to kind of we need to validate people's kind of experience of difficulties that they are facing. And when you stop to consider the difficulties that people on their support network are often facing, they are. Well, yeah, they are difficult. I don't want to use the term challenging because that has quite negative connotations, but yeah. So the topics included will be briefest autism history, introducing profound autism and PDA profile of autism, briefly talking about the terminology around the proposed subtypes and problems with that, going on to autism and pro-subtypes advocacy history, and then pro-subtypes implications for advocacy, and then just reflective questions at the end. So yeah, autism used to be used to be part of. So it used to be it was folded into childhood schizophrenia, and it had a quite. It was used to be quite rare. So in 1966, its prevalence rates were 1 in 2,500, and now it's around 1 in 100. Some prevalence rates are significantly lower than this. And around the late 1980s, early 1990s, autism broadened out into a spectrum. So, and under the DSM-4, which is the American Diagnostic Psychiatric Manual from 1984 to 2013, the most commonly diagnosed autism subtype was pervasive developmental disorder not otherwise specified. More recently, the three autism subtypes have been collapsed into a single autism category within the DSM-5, and it now has three kind of specifiers of support levels, so from 1 to 3, and that kind of high function autism is equivalent to Asperger's. The current prevailing view on autism subtypes is that there's indistinguishable clinical differences and support kind of packages for the autism with basically for the different autism subtypes, which was pervasive developmental disorder not otherwise specified, Asperger's syndrome, and autistic disorder. That's one of the reasons why they were collapsed into 3. The other reason was to reduce stigma for all autistic persons. So, yeah. More recently, there's been 2 proposed autism subtypes. So, the kind of more prominent one is kind of what's been called profound autism, which is when attributed to when someone has autism with co-occurring intellectual disability and/or language impairment. There's no consensus over what profound autism is, so there's a few variations of what it could be in the literature. So, it's been so more recently it's been broadened to include kind of severe autism added to it, and the kind of slightly before that, it's profound autism has been broadened to include severe and challenging behaviours, including self-injury, aggression, and irritability. And there's also connotations attached with profound autism, which is for autistics who do not have profound autism, they're meant to be less autistic. And profound autism is meant to be for those who have 24-hour support and cannot advocate for themselves. Profound autism advocates are also advocating that autism subtypes are created using co-occurring difficulties such as anxiety. So the second proposed subtype is PDA Profile of Autism, and what this diagram shows, it shows a series of continua, and these are arrows. So the red end is the features meant to be kind of more impaired, more difficulty. The green end is meant to be less impaired or not a problem. And so left hand side you got PDA Profile of Autism, right hand side you got kind of classic or more straightforward autism. So this kind of includes features like anxiety, avoidance of order demands, impulsivity, rapid mood changes, kind of socially strategic to manipulative avoidance behaviour, kind of and you'll notice that PDA Profile autism is meant to have more impairing aspects to it than kind of just non-PDA Profile autism. There is an alternative way of looking at this, which is that PDA Profile autism just represents features of a co-occurring difficulty such as ADHD, anxiety, conduct disorder, opposition to fight disorder, and trauma, and the right hand side is just autism. So, yeah, you can put these together. So this is a brief diagram. So the x-axis has IQ, so it's basically just intelligence, and the y-axis is basically functioning, so that's for inverse support needs. So the big green circle is the DSM-5 autism, the yellow circle on the bottom left is profound autism, and the bottom right is kind of PDA Profile of Autism. So yeah, this is because they're both meant to have high support needs, and PDA Profile of Autism is on the right because it's mainly seen in those who have average or above average intelligence, or kind of speaking. So yeah, moving on, there is some terminology around PDA Profile autism which is quite similar to profound autism. So non-PDA autism is meant to be kind of conventional or classic autism, and this is still used today, and this is kind of contrasted to kind of PDA Profile autism. The connotations of that is that PDA Profile autism equals kind of atypical, unusual, unconventional, unorthodox, or unpopular. I'll just say that if PDA Profile autism is unconventional or unorthodox, etc., it's just not autism, which is kind of my view on the topic. So, yeah, there's other terminology in the PDA literature. So there's PDA Profile autism kind of equals kind of complex or kind of perplexing, and non-PDA autism has been described as kind of more straightforward presentation of autism. So, yeah, and the latter has connotations that's kind of easy, and these are problematic. So, yeah, the first thing they do is they excuse PDA's non-autism features, which is quite a bit. It also shows that PDA Profile of autism is a functioning category, and that there's the such terminology is also seen in kind of profound autism because it creates a false dichotomy, and it allows kind of some autistics to be viewed as being less autistic. So, for example, we know that kind of non-profound autistics are meant to have less autism than profound autism, and you want to view it the same with PDA Profile of autism. So, yeah, it's been noted that both subtypes risk diagnosing non-autistic persons with autism, and they risk kind of confusing co-occurring issues with autism. So, there's also big issues around the stereotypes that are kind of created from such kind of functioning categories and the impacts that they have. So, yeah. Moving on to brief history around autism advocacy. So traditionally, advocacy for autism was dominated by caregivers, and the kind of the autism industry is primarily aimed at caregivers. But kind of the last 30 years, there's been a burgeoning and kind of increasing kind of effective and advocacy network, advocacy by Autistics, and it started in 1993 by Jim Sinclair's Don't Mourn for a Speech. Um, and autistic persons tend to know what we want. So generally, we know that we don't want subtypes. And many autistic advocates and researchers are against profound autism and other functioning categories. um, and some of the more recent kind of activities includes like opposing aims 2 and Spectrum 10K. Um, are kind of some of the more recent high-profile efforts. So yeah, the rationale for both for both these prototypes is actually quite similar. So for profound autism, it's meant to be that it has different support needs from other autistic persons, and it enables people to prioritise needs of this vulnerable and underserved group. And they view profound autism as being kind of often excluded from research and kind of just from research, and it also allows people to kind of prioritise research funding to profound autism. Some people are proposing profound autism to split autism category into two groups because they think autism has expanded too far. In relation to PDA Profile of Autism, it's to allow strategic planning, comparison of research findings, enable access to certain resources, and to better understand children and young persons. So, yeah. Around PDA, it's a tradition driven by non-autistic persons, mainly caregivers. The literature notes that caregivers are highly motivated to take part in research, and our interest in the concept of PDA largely centres on in the UK, and it's currently a culture around concepts in the UK. Also, the interest in PDA largely took off around 2010, and this research has far outstripped its evidence base. Increasingly, there are a number of autistics supporting PDA, so as a profile of autism. So this is kind of the one of more kind of problematic aspects of this kind of advocacy. So this is an image of by Sally Cat, who was attacking me about 2 years ago with it. There's other examples. So, for example, there was a defamatory petition against Damien Milton for his critique of PDA. So, yeah, I'm moving towards kind of the impacts of these proposed subtypes on advocacy. So, these are 3 items from 3 separate PDA tools. So, and basically they indicate that PDA Profile of Autism pathologises personal self-agency. So the first one is, I complain about illness or physical incapacity to avoid a request or demand, or they attempt to negotiate better terms with adults, or they use apparently manipulative behaviour. I put out that the bottom 2 would be kind of viewed as positives in non-autistic people, and the second one you particularly want people to be doing. So, yeah. So many features pathologised in PDA are for those people often express to exert the self-agency, especially when they're stressed or stressed. So we also know that PDA Profile of Autism represents pathologising of autistic advocacy. And this is a quote from CAP 2023, which is a really good article, and I highly recommend it. So, when people genuinely said to be incapable of communication find ways of making clear what they do and don't want through means other than words, this is self-advocacy. Baggs clarified that self-advocacy includes what some refer to as behavioural problems in response to abuse or violence against them. And so, yeah, I mean, when you look at PDA tools, they often include features which are unpleasant when expressed towards others, or they just represent criminal behaviours, which require intent to commit them. There's some empirical research suggesting that PDA, but not autistic traits, predicted stalking behaviour, and then PDA does not have theory of mind deficits. We also know that the PDA social avoidance behaviour is described as manipulative or strategic, gives others carte blanche, just ignore our views. So yeah, and this kind of matters because the profound autism advocates are mainly kind of caregivers and some researchers. So, profound autism advocates are claiming that autistic neurodiversity supporters are harassing them. And this matters because like non-disabled autistic persons cannot advocate for those with profound autism. I'm not. So what I mean by that is non-profound autistics. I'm saying that this is sorry. I'm just literally referencing what's being said. So, um, they also argue that we should ignore preferences of non-disabled autistic persons, and that profound autism of AVA's terms should be used. So, yeah, profound autism is intended for those who cannot advocate for themselves, and that autistic IQ scores often depends on context of the IQ test and tool being used. So, for example, the most appropriate tool to use to assess autistic intelligence is Raven's progressive matrices. And what I'm trying to get to here is that the advocates for proposed autism subtypes can use it to split the autism group in two, and there's quite enough autistic persons who do not fit into either category, and we know that this is generally is not a good idea. So yeah, I got some reflective questions like what is the impact of efforts to subtype autism upon solidarity amongst the autistic community? What are the potential harms of the possible application of profound autism and/or PDA Profile of Autism? Could well-informed person-centered practice be preferable to one based on categorical subtyping? And what are the other likely effects of profound autism and/or PDA Profile of Autism on autistic advocacy? So these are my contact details. So there's my email address, Twitter handle, ResearchGate, YouTube channel, which you should be watching on, and there are 6 reference slides. So I'm not going to linger on them long because you can pause the video and access them or see the slides. So yeah, so this is the second reference slide. I should point out that this is a test video for a talk I'm delivering at a conference at Leeds University for their critical disabilities group. So yeah, this is the last slide, so thank you for watching and I hope you have enjoyed this video.